Well, I don't believe that anything that happens on Saturday is going to wipe away the South Carolina disappointment, but you get to a bowl game, you get 15 extra practices, you got a shot at a winning record, and oh, yeah, bragging rights in the state. So, whole lot to play for on Saturday in Columbia. We got Chris Phillips here, the best option I can come up with, that's for sure, to talk some South Carolina football. Catch Chris on the Spurs Up Show each and every day. Chris, how you doing today?
Mark, I'm doing well, man. I appreciate you having me. Happy rivalry week and happy early Thanksgiving to you and yours. This is a great week, one of my favorite weeks in the college football season. Bragging rights on the line, for the winner, jubilation, excitement, trash talk, and for the loser, it's your worst nightmare, right? And that's what makes college football so great. So really appreciate you having me on, Mark, and excited to chat with you.
Well, Chris, I'm not going to pretend I've seen less South Carolina football this year than I have in the last few seasons because there's just been less reason to watch it. I tuned in for a little bit against Kentucky, got a victory there to keep hopes alive for postseason play and a winning record. And it hasn't been real pretty, has it, this season?
No, it's been ugly. And it's been a mixed bag, too. I mean, South Carolina at home, Spencer Rattler in this Gamecocks offense up until last weekend had been brilliant, right? I mean, Spencer Rattler, who was actually solid last week. Let's say that against Kentucky, he was efficient, had 2 touchdowns, no turnovers, right? That was the big thing. But it's really been a 2 or 3 man show on offense, Mark, this year with Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette leading the way. Mario Anderson has stepped up somewhat at running back, giving them just even a semblance of a running game. But Mark, who this team is, who we saw early in the season against North Carolina, that's kind of who they've been all year, right? They've combated a bad offensive line. They've combated a weak defense. And, again, they've been able to overcome that here and there. But for the most part, that's been their undoing. And all the wins coming at home, right? They have not been able to secure a win away from Williams-Brice Stadium this season. And so Saturday, they're looking against Clemson to by far get their highest quality win of the year, that game being Kentucky right now. So it's been an array of problems for sure, Mark, offensively, defensively, and even special teams. There have been gripes about Beamer ball not quite living up to preseason expectations, but certainly that win against Kentucky was a quality win. Gamecocks have won 3 in a row, and now if they can beat their arch rival, they'll punch their ticket to bowl eligibility. And you mentioned Mark, top of the show, nobody's going to throw a parade if you go 6-6 and go to a bowl game, but it's much better than going 5-7 and sort of accelerating the offseason process in regards to looking around and saying, hey, what has to change? What has to be fixed going into year 4 of Shane Beamer? So obviously getting that 6th win, closing the regular season on a 4-game winning streak will be big, but certainly there's been a lot left to be desired this year. And I look back, Mark, at that Florida game, middle of the season, that was the one I talked all summer. That was the key game of the year. Losing that one really sent this South Carolina football season for a tailspin. And again, they'll look to salvage something and take the sting out of year 3 of the Shane Beamer era Saturday against Clemson.
And Chris, that fix-it list you allude to has to go to the running game that you also alluded to because – man, you cannot ride the right arm of a quarterback all the way through this league and to not be able to run the ball. And I check out all the box scores every week, and then I'll whip through the highlights or go to a condensed version of the game to see what's going on. And this team just has not been able to run the ball.
And yeah, Mark, it starts up front with the offensive line. I mean, you look at what they did in the transfer portal, the guys they lost. They lost Jalen Nichols, their top offensive lineman during the spring. You and I talked about that before. And then Shane Beamer and company, I mean, let's call it for what it is. They went out in the portal and they picked up guys from Yale and Western Illinois and Charlotte and Mercer. And I understand they were trying to plug and play and fill holes, but that group has played most of this season like an FCS offensive line. It just has not lived up to the billing. It has not lived up or been up to par, I should say. And let's be fair, too, Mark. Many SEC teams have struggled on the offensive line. I feel like the ones that have struggled the most, they've struggled on offensive line. That's where it all starts. So the Gamecocks have got to plug those holes. Also, they've got to go out in the transfer portal, Mark, and get a quality running back or two. They're excited for freshman Dontavius Braswell, and they've got Matthew Fuller, a 4-star committed who's on the way. But they need to go out and do what they did not do last year, and that's go get a proven Power 5 ball carrier. Again, I say that with all due respect to Mario Anderson, the Newberry transfer, who has been as good as you could ask for this season for them. I mean, again, he's given them just some semblance of balance, right? At times when they could not find any other ways to run the football or move the football on the ground. Mario Anderson has gotten really, really tough yards, grinding out 2, 3, 4 yards a carry, which again, for this offense is success. But you're right, Mark. This entire season has been put on Spencer Rattler. And I mean, that's another thing that makes his performance so brilliant. But you won't have that luxury next year, Mark, because Spencer Rattler is going to go to the NFL draft, as is Xavier Legette. The Gamecocks did get big news yesterday that I'm sure you saw, that Juice Wells will be returning to school next year. So you got a wide receiver one, but you're going to have a young quarterback and more than likely Lenora Sellers, who's never really played a meaningful snap. So you're going to need that running game to help him out and assist him. So that certainly is something, as you mentioned, Mark, a top priority this offseason and something they have to get addressed.
We've got Chris Phillips here from the Spurs Up Show. It's Monday through Friday, and it's noon Eastern time, correct?
Noon Eastern to 2 Eastern. Yeah, that is the Daily Crow. That's our live show, which airs on Facebook, X, and YouTube. And then the podcast, which can be found at the Spurs Up Show, drops on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts every single day, 5 p.m. Eastern that afternoon. So we're dropping daily pods, daily videos on YouTube, daily live shows. And anywhere you get your content on social media, we are there at the Spurs Up Show.
Hey, Chris, is your evaluation of what Shane Beamer is all about and what he brings to the table any different than it was, let's say, in August? Or is the fan base wavering at all?
It's not different, not necessarily. I'm not surprised the way South Carolina, Mark, has looked this season. The only thing that surprised me is that Florida game. That's the one that South Carolina should have won that football game. There's no excuse. You're up 10 with 5 minutes to go in your home field. There's just no excuse to lose that game. But outside of that, Mark, I mean, I picked this team to go 7-5 in the preseason. I picked this team to go 7-5 over the summer. Had you beaten Florida, you'd be entering the Clemson game with 6 wins. 7 wins would still be on the table. So it hasn't been totally shocking. It's not the progression this fan base wanted to see from last year, beating Tennessee and Clemson and winning 8 games. It's not the progression anyone in the fan base wanted to see. I think there's been moments where folks have started to maybe question Shane Beamer somewhat, especially when you lose 4 in a row. Some of those losses are really ugly. And again, what's happened this year, Mark, is South Carolina has been exposed for their failures in the transfer portal. I mean, I think that's the thing that's most bothersome. But I think this fan base still has a great belief in Shane Beamer, what he's all about. I mean, he's a Gamecock through and through. He mentions seemingly every day this is his dream job. And I don't think that there's a better fit out there for South Carolina. But, Mark, what this season has reinforced for me is that no coach, no matter how great of a culture fit you are, no matter how much goodwill you've built up, no matter what games you've won, no coach is immune to the effects of losing. Because I never thought, I mean, we go all the way back, Mark, to the Tennessee game. I never thought I would start to hear chatter about Shane Beamer's future in Columbia after that game, so early in year 3 of his tenure. And as the losses piled up, that chatter got louder and louder and only continued. So I think Shane Beamer, Mark, is going to get till 2025. I don't think next year is going to be some determining factor. Although if South Carolina's sitting at 2-6 like they were this year, who knows? Maybe his name all of a sudden is surfacing on the hot seat. But I think he'll get till year 5. I think he gets till 2025. And I think from there, you kind of take a step back. You look at where you are, what you have. And at that point, I think you'll know. But I still have great belief in Shane Beamer. My opinion of him necessarily hasn't changed. But I will say this, Mark. This is by far the most important transfer portal cycle upcoming because they've got needs they have to address. And I think after this season, looking at the lackluster performances from some of the lower level players they picked up, I don't think the fan base is going to be quite as thrilled or give the benefit of the doubt if you're going out and getting those same caliber players. South Carolina needs to go out and get some difference makers. If they can do that, they got a great chance to have a bounce back season in 2024. But the expectations will be high, even with the first-year starting quarterback, and it's going to be interesting to say the least what happens. But I think this fan base is behind Shane Beamer. But again, as I mentioned, Mark, no coach is immune to the effects of losing, and we'll see how that plays out in Columbia.
If you enjoyed the content, everyone, please hit the like button and support Chris's work there. The Spurs Up Show, the Daily Crow, 12 to 2 Eastern time, Monday through Friday. And subscribe here at the Voice of College Football. We've got a SEC channel that we launched in August. Grab the link. It's in the description section unless, of course, you're watching this segment there. Could be watching it a number of places. All right. I've never lived in the state. I vacationed there several times out on the coast, but I can only gather so much from that. I get my word from you. I get it from others. I see the vitriol on social media between Clemson and South Carolina fans. Can you kind of give us an idea of what this rivalry's like?
Yeah, Mark, it's pure hatred. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's something you live with 365 days a year. So many people in this state, there's no pro sports, right? I think Shane Beamer and Dabo Sweeney mentioned this in their press conferences this week, but there's no pro sports, right? So either one way or another, you're going to find yourself in the middle of this rivalry. Even if you didn't grow up in it, you just moved to the state, right, to work in Charleston or Greenville or Columbia or Rock Hill or North Augusta, right? At some point, you got to pick a side. You're either garnet and black or orange and purple. There is no in between, right? So it's something where, there are split households, right? There are friendships, there are relationships, there are coworkers that they don't speak this week. Maybe they don't speak next week either. It's that serious. It's that real. I'm someone that, Mark, I grew up in the state of South Carolina, had a lot of friends that were Clemson friends of mine, had some Gamecock buddies as well, Georgia buddies, and it's really one of the reasons why we love college football so much, man, is the rivalries, the bragging rights, the emotions, and the energy behind this game, because it says something where, for both sides this year especially, but on a year in, year out basis, you can be having kind of a lackluster season, not the season you wanted. But if you win that last game, if you win that rivalry game, it takes the sting out of an otherwise lackluster year, and certainly that's the case this season. And, I know both fan bases this year somewhat feel that way. But, I mean, it's Mark, I'd go as far to say there's some people on both sides of this rivalry, I'm convinced they hate their rival more than they like their own team. So that gives you an idea of just how deep this runs. And like I said, it's families divided, friendships divided, coworkers who won't speak to each other. It's that type of rivalry, and certainly the intensity will be at an all-time high on Saturday.
Well, Chris, because of all of that and more, I know that you know the Clemson program about as well as anyone that's not covering the team on a regular basis day to day. And, what's your take on this elite program that's fallen from grace? They've played a little bit better football in recent weeks, so they've shown some pride that they're not going to lay down and give up on this season, but still, it's not the program that it was a few years ago.
Mark, how I just spoke on Shane Beamer in this season has sort of shined a light on some of the mistakes that they've made in the transfer portal in this previous cycle and the way the portal hurt them. We could say the same thing about Dabo Sweeney. This season shined a light on a coach who didn't swing and miss, but a coach who's not even willing to embrace the transfer portal, at least to this point, right? There were holes on that roster in different places that he wasn't willing to go out and get a guy and fill a need and fill a void. It's been an interesting fall from grace for them. Clemson was a team, admittedly, that I thought, Mark, I was very high on coming into the season. I thought Garrett Riley was the answer at the offensive coordinator spot. I thought Cade Klubnik would bounce back and have a big year. And I mean, they stubbed their toe out the gate, right? Losing that game to the Duke Blue Devils, which give Duke credit. But I mean, that was a game that I fully expected Clemson to win that game. So, they've missed on the offensive side. I think Clemson's living proof, Mark, that all it takes for a great program to fall is miss on a quarterback once or twice. That's it. You miss on a quarterback once or twice, and all of a sudden you come back down to reality. Because defensively, you look at the numbers, Mark, they're still one of the best in college football. I mean, 288 yards per game allowed. South Carolina's going to have their hands full going up against that front seven, that secondary as well, that entire defense. But, I mean, they've still got dudes on dudes on dudes on the defensive side, but Clemson's they've missed on quarterback. And they've missed on wide receiver. They don't have the playmakers they used to have, like the Mike Williams or the T. Higgins or those Sammy Watkins, those big time players. They just don't have those guys. So I think Clemson's still a really good talented team. I think they're still a supremely talented team in this matchup. But that didn't matter last year. You know what I mean? That didn't matter last year, and I don't know that matters yet again this year either. So this is one that Dabo Sweeney has faced a lot of criticism. He's taken a lot of heat. I wonder if he changes his ways moving forward. And certainly, this is one that Clemson, they beat South Carolina on Saturday. No Clemson fan's going to beat their chest and say 8-4 was a successful year, not for a team that had college football playoff aspirations. But they lose to Clemson, they lose to South Carolina, and Dabo Sweeney falls to the Gamecocks twice in a row. the pressure and the chatter regarding his future, I think it's really going to heat up, and it's going to be interesting to see what the fallout would be in Tiger Town if that did take place. But, I think that if they can nail quarterback and find some playmakers on the outside of the offensive side, there's no reason why Clemson can't take advantage and run wild in the ACC. But, again, Dabo Swinney, adapt or die in this new age of college football. We'll see what he does.
How much of an impact will this game have on recruiting? Are there a lot of guys that both schools are fighting for?
Admittedly, Mark, South Carolina and Clemson, it doesn't happen as often as you would think, where these two schools are fighting it out for one specific prospect. Like that you would think that happened a lot more, but I think one of the biggest reasons it doesn't, give Clemson credit, Mark, because of their success, 6 straight college football playoffs, they don't recruit the state, I think, as diligently as South Carolina does, because the Clemson brand, they're able to branch out and go get the number 1 player from the state of Ohio, from Alabama, from Florida. So I think the Clemson recruiting footprint is a little bit more national than maybe South Carolina is. Now, granted, South Carolina's shown the ability they dominate the DMV, right? They go to different parts of the Southeast, the Midwest, what have you. But it doesn't, for whatever reason, Mark, it doesn't happen as often as you would think. But certainly with that being said, we think about South Carolina's greatest run in school history. It was 2010-13 under Steve Spurrier. What did they do so well, Mark, during that time? They dominated in-state recruiting, and they got all the best players from the state of South Carolina. So certainly winning this football game, dominating the state, it's a really big deal. And so I think for the Gamecocks, when you talk about recruiting, not just from the local level, but the national level as well, you beat Clemson again, that only boosts recruiting, and not just high school recruiting, but luring guys to the transfer portal as well.
You see his Twitter handle right there. Chris Phillips joining us, the Spurs Up Show, the Daily Crow. And I'm guessing, Chris, we'll get your pick on Friday.
So I'm ready to give it to you now if you'd like. So I'm actually, because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we have no live show Thursday or Friday. I'm doing different things with family both days, actually. So our last live show of the week will air tomorrow, but I will drop the pick, and I've already made the pick. I'm actually, I look at this game, Mark. South Carolina winners of 3 in a row. Clemson winners of 3 in a row. So this isn't a situation like Kentucky last weekend where, the Cats had lost 4 of 5, had just got beaten up by Alabama. This is a confident Clemson team rolling in here. It'll be a raucous environment, Mark. As you know, Williams-Brice Stadium will be a madhouse. I am concerned about South Carolina on the lines of scrimmage, which is not a new concern at all. But I think last week, especially against Kentucky, the one thing you could depend on all year is, man, the Gamecocks, they've been elite on offense at home. Whatever it is, Spencer Rattler and that offensive attack, they click like none other. Mario Anderson and that offensive attack rushed for 50 yards, and Spencer Rattler had 27 of them. That was against the Kentucky defensive front. I just don't know how they're going to generate anything on the ground and how they're going to keep Spencer Rattler upright. It's going to take, just like last year, an elite performance, a special performance. South Carolina has been better defensively of late, but still, I think that's a leaky defense. The 1-2 combo of Maffa and Shipley, I think, will be enough. Last year, Clemson, you could argue, lost that football game because they stopped giving the ball to Will Shipley. They stopped running the football. I don't think Clemson makes that mistake 2 years in a row. Turnovers is massive in this game. I know that's such low-hanging fruit, Mark, and that's so cliche, but you look at Clemson this year, they've had trouble holding on to the football, and when South Carolina generates multiple turnovers at home, they win. I think Clemson's got a little bit more than South Carolina. I know the game's at home at night. I just don't know that the Gamecocks have the horses to keep up in this one. I think it's a close back and forth game. If the Gamecocks offense can find balance, look out. But that's going to be so much easier said than done. This is this is by far the best defense they've played on the home field. And again, you saw what Kentucky did to them. So I'm going Clemson to get their revenge 27-20. That's not going to be a popular pick when I release it, but I'm going with my head and not my heart. And again, Mark, I just think that, this is a Clemson team riding high, winners of 3 in a row. They're a lot like Kentucky. They're just better than Kentucky at every single position, and I think that will be enough to get the victory and get their revenge at Williams-Brice Stadium.
Make Chris and the Spurs Up Show and the Daily Crow one of your SEC football stops. And as we take it into the offseason, of course, basketball and baseball there with South Carolina and the SEC. Chris, good to see you. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you enjoy your couple days off, and we will catch you soon.
Mark, it's always a pleasure, my friend. I appreciate you having me and look forward to chatting again soon.